Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Hobie Sears, and I'm going to talk to you today. I'm becoming an expert in service, and we'll get to that and what that means in the next minute. I am a regional service manager. I'm the director of training for Provo Medical, and primarily we've been an ultrasound company. We are a little bit of an everything imaging company these days. But my focus has been ultrasound in my entire career. Not going to really talk about ultrasound a lot today. This is a very kind of generic across the breadth. Really, you can apply this to really anything. We're going to talk about how do you become an expert in service today. This applies truly to a lot of things in life, I think. I've kind of learned this over we're just going to call it 30 plus years working in medicine and in the medical world and service. And just because I don't really feel like adding a year to my slide every year anymore. So I think that's good enough. But 20 plus of those years have been in the multi-vendor segment. So I worked with a manufacturer early on. You're going to hear a little bit about that as my journey, and we talk about this. But the vast majority of time has been spent multi-vendor, an independent service organization. So really in the same trenches that most folks are as biomeds and imaging engineers in a hospital. So I have taught a bunch of people and worked in doing that over the years as well. None of that really necessarily applies too much today. So let's talk about becoming an expert in service. So if you're here, really, even if you're here at this conference, in my mind, you have some idea or some interest in becoming an expert in what you do. Now, maybe that is an expert in delivering service. Maybe that's an expert in a particular type of equipment. But one thing's for sure, and when we start talking about becoming an expert in something, this is not necessarily the easiest road you're going to go down in your career. You know, there's just hard things that come from trying to become great at something. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. What's that pathway look like? What are some of the hurdles? And what are the things that you need to do that make it easier to get there, so to speak? So it's not short, that's for sure. Nobody becomes an expert in days or months. You may think you do, that's false, and I will cognitively say that no problem. I think I ran into that early in my career, for sure, and we're going to talk very specifically about that, so I can, you know, kind of warn you not to do that. But you know, it takes time. But the great news is there's other people that have done this, and we're going to talk about that as well, and how you refer to them and what you get out of the people that are in front of you, and then how you'll return that as a favor as well. So the number one thing, and it's funny because I have three things, right? But pretty much one of these things is going to apply to you. And if you don't have this number one thing, you're probably not going to become an expert. That's just the reality. So whether it's desire or passion or willingness to become an expert, you're going to need one of these three things. And a lot of people today, they don't like this word desire. Desire has a weird connotation, like it's almost been monetized, like I desire to just make money, or it almost has a strange connotation to it. I think it's just the overwhelming emotion that you want to improve yourself in this way. And some people might better supplant the word passion for that, and that you're passionate about becoming an expert. Maybe you're passionate about becoming an expert on a particular device, or maybe you're just passionate about becoming an expert in the delivery of service. So then there's this third thing, and it's kind of different from passion or desire, and it's willingness, and the willingness to become an expert. This is where I fit in a little bit, and at least in my early journey. So I was graduated from college. Actually, I hadn't even graduated, and signed a contract to work with a company called Accuson back in 1990. So showing my age a bit. So at the time, just to give you a little bit of an idea of where this sits, Accuson was the #1 pretty much ultrasound manufacturer in the world. And based out of California. Matter of fact, today, Google is in our old offices. That's kind of the nature of the offices that we were in. And very California company, very pro. We had hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank and zero debt. So it was kind of like working for Apple and Google at the time, and you kind of felt that way. And they gave you a big head about this as you were going through training. Training was impressive, and we were out there for 6 or 8 weeks, and then traveled to different parts of the country as you were becoming a service engineer, to do what they called soloing. And then when it became time for me to actually go where I was going to be based, and that ended up being Ann Arbor, Michigan for me, as I was getting ready to go there and preparing for that, they came to me and they said, hey, we just want you to know that you're going into an area where the guy that is leaving, he's leaving to go become a chiropractor. He decided in the middle of his life he's going to change what he's doing completely. He was twice my age. He was like 45 years old. And I'm like 21 at this point. And by the way, there's a doctor at the University of Michigan that is our toughest customer just about on the planet. And you're going to have to learn how to handle her. Oh, and by the way, she goes on vacation with our CEO and calls him weekly. So good luck with that. So it turns out that this doctor is a terrible person. She really is. Not at the heart, not once you get to know her, but once you at the periphery, she's kind of one of these hard-nosed from the 1960s and 70s doctors, and that's what she expects out of me, coming in with her ultrasound equipment. And this is the day and time where if you had 25 ultrasound equipment units in your territory, that was a lot. And you just spent a lot of time keeping 25 up and running. Now it would be like 150 would be an equal amount of ultrasound units to watch. So I kind of dove in, and luckily I was single and I was able to just give her all the attention in the world, but I wasn't a great engineer. I had a college degree, but I had no practical experience. I'd been out 3 or 4 months, really hadn't learned anything. And man, I got beat up pretty hard, all in all. But as time moved on, it was this thing of like, I don't know anything else to do but to be willing to do whatever she wants me to do. So this idea of willingness came into my head, that just get through it. Luckily, not married, didn't have family. I could work ridiculous hours, and I did. And I was there for 2 years. And I remember very cleanly, like when I didn't, have always the technical answer, I would always have the service answer. I could always take care of her, even if I didn't know the answer technically. And so I did that. And then I tried to kind of humanize everything I was doing. I would be in their lab, and sometimes I was in their lab many times over the first 2 years till 10 o'clock at night. And I mean, talk about getting there at 1 in the afternoon and just trying to find, she would find problems that nobody else on the planet could find. And half the time I couldn't even see them. Like it was just that kind of stuff. And I started drawing cartoons. Like as I was leaving, I would sketch out something for 5 minutes, and I'm not a great artist. It wasn't beautiful work or anything, but I'd be like, this is me applauding after I figured out what was wrong with your machine. That kind of stuff, not thinking anything about it. And they'd be like, oh, that was cute. And so that's kind of where it went. With me, it was willingness. That's how I started down my journey. And frankly, by the end of those 2 years, I probably thought I was an expert. I really had a long way to go. I didn't realize that till later, but the willingness took over. And so for me, that was the thing it was. That was my one thing. It was willingness. It wasn't really desire. I was too young to desire it. Didn't really know any better. I guess I had a bit of passion because that really drew into it. But for me, it was willingness. I just wanted to prove myself, I think to my company, I think to me, and I think in the end to the customer, but it was willingness that drove me. That's the first question you have to answer, is what's going to drive you? Because becoming an expert in anything is difficult. And so you're going to have to come up with a driving force to get there. So what are you going to become an expert in? And a lot of times we don't know the answer to this either, but we hear a lot with folks that work in hospitals. While I'm in biomed, or even if you're in imaging sometimes, I'm a bit of a generalist. We do everything. Okay, become an expert in the delivery of that service. That's okay. You don't necessarily have to pick a product. I think it's a little easier if you pick a product that you want to be an expert in, because it's very focused, very focused. You're able to just say, okay, I'm going to do everything to become the best CT guy, or shoot, I'm going to be everything to be the, you know, I'm starting off with pumps. I'm going to be the best at taking care of pumps, right? You know, whatever that might be. You just need to pick it. The reality is, the journey is going to be very similar, no matter it's a product or whether you're going to focus on delivering service, or, you know, your expertise might even end up in mentoring. I'm going to be great at helping those coming up behind me. Odds are you've become an expert in something else before you do that, but that's where your focus is. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you keep it in mind. Doesn't even matter if it changes, and that can happen over time as well. So as you make this decision and you decide what you're going to be an expert in, whether that's X-ray, or in my case, ultrasound, or taking care of pumps, that kind of thing, it's going to help you move down the pathway faster. And as you move down that pathway faster, it's okay to take a turn. It's even okay to back up and go the other way. You know, it doesn't mean, you know, you may think, oh yeah, I'm going to be the CT guy for this hospital for the next 10 years, and you get a year into it, your manager goes, and you know what, we're going to move you to this for whatever reason. That doesn't take away from what you're going to do. It really just alters your pathway. Maybe it sets you back a couple months. That's fine. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to measure in amount of time as in months anyway. This is kind of a lifelong, career-long journey. So one of the things that you need to do, and you need to be very cognizant of doing, is something I call taking the time and spending the effort. So when we go to become an expert in something, and this applies a little bit more towards working on a piece of equipment, but you can see how it would apply to just becoming a service expert. And part of this is when you spend the extra time fixing a problem to understand the root cause. Experts don't just get in and get out. Now, there are days when we do, right? And we're not talking about individual days. We're talking about the sum of the whole thing, right? We want to know, why did something work? How did we fix this? You know, and hopefully we know in the forefront how we fixed it, but what was the thing to learn about that? And to focus on those kinds of things. So every service event becomes something that you're building on from an experience level, from a knowledge level, and moving from there. You know, might be as simple as pulling out a service manual, even when you think you know the answer, to confirm it. You know, at that point, or to see what else, you know, what else can I learn based on this? I had a situation come up last week. We're fighting a unit that's over in Virginia, and I get a lot of these calls. And so we start diving into some stuff, and you know, there was a cable, and I'm like, well, I think I know what this cable does. And then I looked it up. I'm like, huh, I absolutely did not know what this cable did. You know, what I thought it did was something different than what the signal it actually did pass. So, you know, and I've been working on that individual product for more than 10 years, and I'm considered to be the expert on that product. And yet I learned something just last week about that. So there's always something to learn, even if you've reached expert level, which I get told I am. That's the only reason I really know, or not. Every repair is a learning adventure. I think one thing that experts see out of repairs is that they are learning adventures. They're not just something to slog through, right? And sure, we all have days when we just have to get through the call, but more often than not, we're thinking about what the repair is, how it went, and really, even after the repair, what could I have done differently to make it better? So the next thing about spending the time, taking the effort, you come to a point in your career, and the earlier you come to this point, the better off you'll be, that it is your responsibility to take care of your learning. If you're always looking for your manager or someone else to say, hey, I think you should go to this training, and if that's your mindset, odds are you're not going to go to as many trainings as if you were the one saying, hey, here's the path, and can I get these trainings along the way? Or this training has popped up and it fits my pathway. And putting a case together and arguing for that makes good sense. One of the next things I want to talk about, though, is when you're going to focus on a particular unit or device or modality, it's not only good to learn how to fix it, but you want to understand the modality as a whole and how that fits in to the nature of healthcare in our world, right? And this could apply into any part of your life, but in our world. So in my case, it was ultrasound. So I dove into ultrasound wanting to learn, I'm not a sonographer. I don't scan, uh, but I dove into ultrasound learning about the modality of ultrasound. Why are we using ultrasound in these departments? What it is that they're kind of looking for, talking to end users more and more. So much so that if I was asked a question that an applications person might be needed to fix, I didn't try to supplant that applications person, but I did find out from them, hey, what's the answer that I could tell my customer, or if it's too complicated that you could tell, but then explain it to me. So that way I can begin to understand ultrasound and to go down that pathway. Now, full disclosure, it worked out pretty well. I married a sonographer, so I had a resource readily at hand. And that helped out a lot for me. But not everybody has that. I tell everybody this when they come through some of our trainings, and I teach them, and we go through basic ultrasound. I said, when you go back to your facility, you want to go to ultrasound. If you're going to be the ultrasound guy in your facility, and this could be if you're going to be the pump person, CT, X-ray, anesthesia, whatever. But in my case, it's ultrasound. So I said, go back to one of the ultrasound sonographers and say, hey, if I come and we spend 15 minutes a week or 15 minutes one day a month, can you teach me something about ultrasound? Can you teach me how to scan my carotid? Can you, anything like that? I guarantee you those people will enjoy helping you. And that's exactly what I did. I reached out to my sonographers and got them to help me. And that way I learned about the modality as a whole. And I think that's really important. If you're going to become an expert in something, it's not just about turning a screwdriver. It's about focusing on all of it. So, and that takes a lot of effort. I mean, that's not easy. I mean, even if you think about 15 minutes, that's 15 minutes once a week or once a month, and it's just even the willingness to go do that. It takes a little bit of extra effort to do that, but that's fine. So engage in deliberate practice. This kind of goes along with putting the effort in, but deliberate practice is just that, being very deliberate about what you're learning. So we talk about it all the time in ultrasound. We do a lot of preventive maintenance, like a lot of people do on various devices. And some devices are very simplistic, right? There's not much to PM. You're safety checking them. Maybe that's it. A couple buttons here and there. But then there's other devices that have more to them, and they need a little bit more effort during the PM to get through. And so my thing is, it doesn't really matter what it is that you're PMing. If you, especially, maybe you don't do it on every one, but maybe you do it on every third or fifth one, you're trying to figure out something new about the machine. You're trying to figure out maybe a new way to even complete the PM. I give this example here. Maybe you're PMing and you're the pump guy or gal, and there's 100 to do. So you're not going to like pause on each one and try and ponder something new. It just isn't the kind of device that you're going to figure out something new on 100 different ones. But maybe over the course of doing 100, you figure out a way that saves you 2 minutes per PM. Suddenly, that's a lot of minutes. And it's about that constant deliberation and being very deliberate about what you're doing and not just phoning it in, so to speak. Not just letting it become routine and rote. Every day can be a day to learn something new by the end of the day. So I always say as well, PM days on machines are practice days. That's how I look at it. It's a day to go in and I'm going to practice on that machine. It's great in ultrasound. We see different kinds of ultrasound machines that are all ultrasound, so they all function basically the same way, but maybe they have different menus, maybe they're slightly different, they come apart different ways. So for me, that's a time, I'm not just going in to get it done, I'm going in, my PM time is practice. I get a chance to catch up on that machine again. And it really pays off in the long run. Training. We mentioned training a little bit ago, a few slides back, but just want to hit that again. Training is deliberate practice. If you're going to continue to be good at something, and maybe again, your expertise is going to be in the delivery of service, well, then things like being here, coming and listening to talks, those are the kinds of things that are going to help you move your path down that progress bar to becoming an expert. Those are the things that are going to help. You're not going to come up with every idea on your own. No one does. At least no one after the first person does. And you'll come up with different ideas. So find classes to take, make the case with management that it's worthwhile. That's big. Whenever we talk about training, and I talk about that to biomeds I know in hospitals, I'm like, hey, just because you want to take a class doesn't mean you don't have to prove it's valuable to your management. And you shouldn't be upset with them because they're going to spend the money. If we just figure every class costs $10,000 between travel and cost of class and everything else, that's a significant investment. And some classes are far more than that. Next thing, towards becoming an expert, this is really important. Find a mentor. And you'll see through this as we talk through it, find a couple. So, yeah. Everyone who wants to be better at something searches out those that are already experts to learn from. I did. And in the technical world, we do that. We always find the guy that was doing it before you or the gal that was doing it before you and say, hey, how did you fix this problem? And, what did you, and so they may have the fix. And you could say, well, that's cheating a little bit. Yeah, but as long as you're learning and you're taking that fix and you're building upon it, it's adding to your experience. And that's okay. So find a mentor. Might be a coworker. It might be a friend in the industry. It might be a vendor. I've been in that situation where as the vendor, I've had many people at hospitals under my wing that call me. And it's a little different. There's kind of two kinds of it. Well, not really two kinds of a mentor. When people call me for tech support, I'm not their mentor. They're going to call me. They're going to ask me a specific question. I'll give them an answer. Sometimes they never call me back and tell me whether I was right or wrong. That's tech support. Mentoring's a little different. Mentoring is they're calling me and we're not only talking about the problem, we're talking about their approach. We're talking about what they're telling the customer. And then in the end, I'm also going to tell them when they're wrong. Probably not going to do that with a lot of tech support calls and customers that I don't have relationships with. But people that I'm mentoring, yeah, I'm going to tell them when they're wrong. Just like my mentors told me when I was wrong and still do today. And it's something, and you need a mentor that's going to do that. If you don't have somebody that tells you when you're wrong, then how do you ever know when you're wrong? And we all are, right? I mean, there's never a time when we're always right all the time. It just isn't going to happen. So you also may have more than one mentor. That is great. I call that a support structure. Just like you might have in your life for various things, you can have a support structure for technical things, or you can have a support structure for just the delivery of service. You may have a mentor that you go to and be like, I have a really tough customer. What do I do to be able to provide better service to them? And you work out that issue with them. Or you find out that, that mentor is like, your relationship with them is a little bit your fault. And why don't you try correcting this behavior and see if that helps? That's a great mentor. And having multiple of them is great. So your primary mentor may also change over time, but I would also caution that if you keep jumping around to different mentors because for some reason you don't like the mentors, you need to figure out why that is. Because if you keep moving through lots of mentors, and there's probably something that's going on with you that makes you not accepting maybe being told wrong. So it's something, hard evaluation sometimes on ourselves. You also need to become a mentor. We don't wait till we are experts to become mentors. Becoming a mentor along the way helps you becoming an expert. So it's true, you do need some sort of expertise. You have to have something to give to this person. You're probably not going to become a mentor to somebody who's been doing the job 10 years longer than you. You know, not in the beginning. You might catch up to them. You never know. But you definitely want to be a mentor. Same rules apply. Being a mentor is being a mentee. Can you tell somebody that they're wrong and do it in a way that's building to them? Do it in a way that is not going to tear them down and make them feel bad, but do it in a way that actually, you know, hey, you need to do X and maybe do it in a little bit better way. Something positive. So another form of mentoring is teaching. Formal or on-the-job training. Really, teaching helps build your own skills while mentoring others. Probably what I would consider today, and as I wrote this talk, one of the greatest accelerators in my path to along this journey was starting to teach. So again, I started in 1990. I started teaching in around 2004, best I can add things up in my head, and I've been teaching ever since. My growth from 2004 to today is vastly superior to my growth as it was in the first 14 years. And I learned a lot then. I learned a lot about ultrasound, worked on machines that were frankly a lot harder to work on than ultrasound is today. But I think I learned how to gain more knowledge and share it with others, which helps you become better at your modality or whatever it is you're becoming an expert in. So I'm a huge believer in teaching and public speaking. I'm a huge believer in doing things like this. Listen, learn to listen, or listening carefully. Experts listen, period. So I think it's one of the keys that you can say, hey, I'm starting to become an expert because I don't just, the second I hear the problem, I don't just plow in and say, oh, I've got that. Because you listen to the entire problem. And you, once you're done listening or, you know, they're done talking, then it's time to ask questions. I think early on in my career, I'd hear the first two words and I'd be like, yep, I got it. And now it's, I listen to everything. Then I ask questions and then I listen again. And I think listening carefully really is crucial. And that's probably not something that you start off doing, but as you grow in your career more and more, it will happen more naturally. Own your mistakes. Experts make mistakes. 8 days ago, I screwed up terribly on a call. And I mean, and I didn't know it when I did it. I figured it out like a half an hour later when it was way too late to do anything about it, at least in the moment. And I was just like, ah, you know, and honestly, I could have been like, oh yeah, it just happened. I could have said that and everybody in the room would have believed me. But I was like, you know what? Nope, I screwed up and I did that. And, you know, experts own their mistakes and we learn from them. I mean, it actually, you know, I was so irritated about this. It took me a couple of hours to like mentally calm down because I had made this stupid mistake. And it was just a dumb mistake. And I really had to sit down and just go, okay, how did I make that mistake? And I figured it out. You know, there was some chaos going on. And what was going on in my head is I was fixing all the other problems that were behind me that I wasn't responsible for. But I was trying to do that in my head, thinking, oh, I can fix their problems. And then I went and made the mistake. So just shows, you know, experts are vulnerable too. So, so don't trivialize them. I could have easily, I could have made it into minutia and been like, yeah, no big deal. But it really was a problem. And in the end, it took me 2 hours to fix it. Something that I made a mistake that took about 30 seconds worth of not doing something cost me 2 hours. So So we learn most from mistakes. We learn also most from those really nasty, hard technical things or things that are hard to do. It's kind of how our brains are wired. Your brain is going to remember those things that are really difficult to do. So don't be afraid to put yourself into those positions because it will definitely pay off in the long run. Focus on the progression. So becoming an expert in anything or gaining expertise is not, it's not quick, and it's got a lot of ebbs and flows to it. So how much time, does it take to become an expert? It really depends on what you're doing and how much you're growing. But this is the kind of thing that's going to be measured in years or decade, more so than in months, that kind of thing. But the reality is there should be growth over time. You should see consistent growth, whether that's measured in months, years, every 5 years, doesn't really matter. As long as you're seeing growth. If there is no growth, then that's a good time to step back and kind of analyze, okay, why? Maybe I picked the wrong thing to be an expert in. I'm not passionate about it. Maybe there's something else. Maybe I'm missing one of these factors, that kind of thing. But there should be growth. When do you become an expert? I really don't know. It's totally honest. I don't know. I don't know. There's no flag that raises. There's no horn that goes off. I've come up with a few hints that I think make sense. You provide more answers than you ask questions on a legitimate scale. You mentor more than you receive. I think that's probably about right. But this should never be mentor more and no reception. I still have mentors, for sure. You find that learning is just as important as doing. I think that's very true. You don't necessarily spend more time learning it. It just becomes more important. I think that's also very true. So this is probably the only thing I've ever come up with when other people start referring to you as an expert. I mean, that happened really when my hair got gray. I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it, but that's just the reality of it. I guess I'm an expert in ultrasound. It's all I've ever done. Know it pretty well, that kind of thing. But it really comes from other people saying this. So this last slide, it really isn't for us to talk about. It is a list, and I printed this out. So if you guys would like this slide, you can have it. I have copies, but I forgot to put them out. I'll grab them. So that's really it. So it's really figure out what your reasoning is, what you're going to become an expert in, invest the time and effort, engage in deliberate practice. This is probably actively the most difficult because we want to just get the job done. We want to fix it, whatever it is. But the more deliberate you are about it, the more you're going to learn from it. Find a mentor. That's a really good mentor. Find somebody that's going to tell you when you're wrong. That's the key. Become a mentor. That is really, you can seek out people to mentor. And that's fine, or they can find you. Learn to listen, own your mistakes, and focus on progression. It's not long, but it is hard.